Hey, welcome to my recover video. So I keep telling people that R has these really great debugging capabilities built right into its REPL. And I often don't have a link or a reference to provide for that. So I guess this is going to be my example, but specifically I want to focus on recover, which is a technique that I've started using more and more in recent months. And I think it's a really useful technique if you subscribe to the nested, tidy sort of, um, group nest, create a list column of data frames, create a list column of models, create a list column of summary statistics type workflow. Hadley Wickham has a great video on this workflow called The Whole Game or something like that, and I'll link to that. Maybe that's worth checking out before you watch this video. But Recover is really great for debugging these types of workflows because they're great in that they allow you to express that in a really succinct way. But it's so succinct. I've got this lambda formula expression here to compactly express a function. It's so succinct that there's almost nowhere to insert debugging hooks when something goes wrong, right? I'll just kind of demonstrate that with a quick example. So I've got empty cars and I'm creating a copy, and I am just randomly setting some of it to NA. And then I'm going to run this code, which does the workflow that I said. So I group by carb, and then I nest, and then I mutate to create a column of, nesting creates a list column of data frames for each group, and mutate creates another list column of models that corresponds to each one of those nested data frames. And it's just a simple linear model. So I get this error, and it's like, okay, how would I attack this? How would I debug this? Well, since I can't really inject any debugging code into here, like a print statement or browser or anything, I guess I've got to start changing the code a little bit, right? And that can be problematic because as soon as I start changing the code, and I'm being a bit butterfingers right now, sorry. As soon as I start changing the code, well, A, that's work. But B, there's always a chance that I will mess up and introduce a new error that confounds the one that I was trying to find in the first place. So am I done here? No. I've got to change this X as well. And that might be something that I kind of forget. So let's run this. Maybe you can eyeball that and see what the problem is, but if you've got tens of thousands of rows, there's no chance. Like, there'll just be too much output, potentially. But I guess what I wanted to say is, this approach is about, well, write some code to exhume the error, and then write some more code to kind of sift through and figure out what the specific error was. And there's other approaches to this. I could maybe write a per wrapper for like using per safely for this or something, but again, that would change the return type of my data, and so you're having to write more code to sort of process and understand your error, which has every opportunity you'll make a mistake. So what we would actually prefer is to not to have to do that. And Recover turns that on its head, and it says, hey, rather than like exhuming the error message and then sifting through to figure out what's going on, let's just dive down to the precise moment when the error happens. Let's pause evaluation of the code and let you kind of interrogate the state of every variable, of every function that was running at that time. And hopefully that will allow you to determine the cause of the error. Okay, sounds pretty magic, right? So to turn it on, we do options error equals recover. And then we run this and we'll get something a bit different. So we've got the error message, and then we've got enter a frame number or 0 to exit. So the frame numbers are these, and what frames are the environments of every function that was running just before the exact moment when the error occurred. So the bottom is where the error occurred, and the top is further away from that. So to be clear, we've got a mutate calling a model, calling a map, which is calling a model, which is LM in this case, and pipe creates a nesting as well. So all that is kind of represented over here. We've got LM, and there's a map, and there's a mutate, and other tidy eval pipe related stuff. So to find the error, or sorry, to find the best place to look for the error, we want to start from the bottom and look for code that looks like code that we wrote, okay? So 14 is something I recognize. I wrote that code. So let's look at frame 14, and I can hit ls. So now I'm inside the environment of that function of lm. And I guess I probably want to look at the data, right? And so pretty much straight away we've got to the problem. I've only got one row, which is a bit surprising, right? But I guess there was a unique level of carb that there was only one row for that level, and I just happened to set the CIL for that row to NA. So, you know, the model had no non-NA examples, so it couldn't fit. Cool. And what you might be tempted to do now is to go, okay, like I want to try and see what that level of carb was. Maybe I want to, you know, see if I can drop it or something. Oh, sorry. So I want to call filter on MTC, and then I want to go MPG equals 15 or something, just to try and find that row. And then I get an error. And why did I get that error? Well, because I am executing code inside the environment of LM. Now that code has a namespace, and it's the namespace of LM, which is stats. So if I'm trying to call filter inside the namespace of stats, which filter do you think is going to get called? Did you guess that it's going to be stats filter, right? So that's just a tip, is that, you know, the code that you're executing is going to be in environments that are different from the global environment where you normally execute code, so the results can be a little bit interesting, let's say. Okay, so to quit out of recover, now that we've found the error, we can hit C to go back to the menu, and we hit 0 to exit, and that closes it out. And you can also hit Q from inside a frame to quit the session. So what do I want to do now? Now I want to show you a more interesting example that represents the first big win I had with Recover, which was about 4 or 5 months ago. So we're going to generate the same error message that I got, and then step through why Recover was kind of really the only viable option. So probably I should just turn Recover off for maximum impact. And you do that with options error equals null. Oh, there we go. And now I'll start running this code. So what I've got here is I've got this similar kind of tidy nested workflow, but I'm introducing another kind of layer which is doing some cross-validation, say, or just validation in this case. But so I create a training and a testing partition using RSample, which has a really nice API where you create a split object, and then I can say, well, you know, training set, and then down here I can say testing set, and I sort of create a group by CIL, create a bunch of models for each level using mutate, and then for each one of those models I try and get some tidy output using Broom augment. So that would create another list column of nested data frames. And if I was to continue that workflow, I might like unnest and have some, you know, a stacked column of tidy summary data, but that's not important here. What's important is that I get an interesting error message. So I've just changed one of the variables to be a factor because that's important for this example. And then I've set the seed suspiciously to 30. I do my random sampling, I call the workflow, and I get this error, right? And this is just like a super depressing error message to get. Just like you come to a screeching halt because, you know, there's nothing in that error message that resembles code that I wrote. You know, data.frame. I don't know, as far as I know, like this would have converted this to a tibble, so what's going on there? Then I've got these numbers, like 8 and 6. Well, I didn't come up with those numbers. So, you know, those numbers are being generated by code that I'm calling, which means like, you know, functions that I'm calling are somehow getting their indexing wrong, and that sounds like something has gone really badly wrong. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying in a kind of long-winded way, sorry, is that I don't know how you would attack this type of thing without recover, because that error message is so intractable, and I've got, you know, multiple blocks where the error could be occurring, so I'd have to start changing this to insert debugging hooks and changing this to insert debugging hooks, and then, you know, with probability 1, I'm going to mess that up and I'll be confused, and, you know, it's just not a good time. So we turn recover on, and let's see if that changes things. And when I got this error message, you know, a few months ago, I wasn't super confident with recover, but I was like, maybe recover's the thing to use in this situation, right? And I was right. So because we get, you know, something that's a bit more complicated, the stack has a bit more going on this time. But immediately I noticed, whoa, as Tibble, this data.frame call that creates the error is being called by as Tibble. So, you know, like that's something that should just kind of work unless we give it really bogus data. You know, as Tibble's cbind, something has gone pretty badly wrong there. And here's where I start to recognize code that I wrote. I definitely wrote Broom augment, right? So we might jump into that and have a look at what is going on in there. So ls, and there's just this x, which is just the model. So that was a fail. But it looks like Broom augment calls augment.lm, so maybe I'll have better luck in there. So 15, and let's see what's in here. So there's data and there's new data. So let's just see what's going on there. And new data. And maybe you can eyeball this and see the problem already, if you're a real guru. But, you know, if you've got tens of thousands of rows, again, there's no chance. And I certainly couldn't when I got this problem. So, you know, what's a good idea is to go, hang on, what is the code that is acting on this data, right? And so we are in augment.lm, so let's just grab that and just ask the console to tell us what that looks like. Turns out it's just a wrapper for augment.columns. So maybe we should be looking in frame 16, which was the frame for augment.columns. And if I do ls now, I'm kind of in a similar situation where, you know, I've got variables that are going to tell me things. There's more of them in this case, and probably too many to sort of just poke at and see what's going on. So again, we should look at the code that's acting on these. So let's go to the code for augment.columns. Just ask the console to print it out again. Okay, so quite a lot there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it, just grab all of it, and just drop it into just an empty file. Okay. Right. And so remember that my console now is the scope, or everything that was in the scope of this function here on the left, up until the exact moment when my error happened. So I can start probing things. You know, I can see what were the variables that were passed in. What do they look like? And immediately I'm getting useful information because I'm finding, okay, a lot of these, you know, weren't set at all. So then when I'm looking through the code now, I can say, well, I don't need to care about type.predict because that wasn't set. And as I continued on to examine this function, the first thing I noticed was, hey, okay, per possibly is being used to change the way that these stats functions, so these stats functions extract data out of models, per possibly is being used to change the way they return errors. That's a bit surprising. I don't know why that's happening, but I certainly, you know, not something I expected to see. And then the next thing that seems to be happening is we're building up a list of arguments. And eventually we use that list to do something. Now, what I can do is just reset that list. And then, you know, I can start examining these statements because I have the data. I'm going, okay, would this have run? Yeah. Okay, so I'll add that. And I know that wouldn't have run because I know that was missing. You know, but we can just check it if we're unsure. Okay, well that would have run, that would have run. Do I have a panel model? I don't know, let's see. I don't, so I don't have to care about that. And now I'm down to here. And I ran that. I went, great, let's have a look at what the predictions were. And they were null. And that's really surprising, right? Because this was specifically the point of what I was trying to do. I was trying to call augment to get me some predictions. Okay. Then the next thing I see is that the predictions, if they are null, then we should return the fitted values. Okay. And at this point, like my spider sense is starting to tingle, and I'm not fully sure, like, sort of in the back of my mind, something's going, oh, you've seen this before, but I hadn't quite, recognized the problem fully. But I knew that basically between this and this line, the problem was being sort of expressed. Because I was thinking, hang on, like, you can't just replace the fitted values with the predicted values, because they're going to be different sizes. The training and the test set are going to be different sizes. And that means that a lot of the rest of this stuff I don't have to care about. Like the as-Tibble call that generated the error with the cbind is probably this one or this one down here somewhere. But, good chance I've already found the problem, or where the problem is being created. So why is that being created? The next thing I did, I thought, well, hang on. Let's just see what would happen if I called the regular predict. So I'm just changing the way that augment works, just sort of doing some experimentation. And I get this completely different error message. And this is way more informative, right? Because this says factor carb has new levels 2, 3. And this is an error that I see maybe like once a year or something like that, right? Where like, every time I come back to do some machine learning type stuff, if I haven't for a while, I'll make this kind of mistake. And just to kind of show you or expose a bit further what's going on, let's just look at what was the structure of the data that I passed in. Well, it had levels of carb that were 1, 4, and 6. Okay, well, what's the structure of the new data that I passed in? So that's the one I want to generate the predictions for. Carb has levels 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what's happened is, the root cause of this is when I did this random sampling step, the random sample just happened to perfectly partition my training and test set such that there were levels in the test set that were never seen before in the training set. And therefore, since they're factors, they don't have any concept of order, rightfully, the prediction, R is refusing to create predictions, which is the right thing to do. But the reason that was really hard to figure out is because that error message is getting swallowed, because predict 0 was the function that was used to generate the predictions, and it is swallowing that error message. And then later on, I'm having these fitted values which are a different length to the predictions that I supplied, and somehow they're getting C-binded together and failing. I'm getting an error about that rather than the error that would have kind of twigged me straight away about this problem that I've seen a few times before. So maybe the next step is to go, hang on, maybe I should raise an issue on the Broom repo, because what we could do is at that step where we do the prediction, maybe we could throw some kind of warning here. Maybe instead of possibly we could do safely, and just turn an error into a warning or something that would give you a hint that something might have gone wrong. All possibilities. And so what's cool is that I went from a really intractable error in my code to finding the source of the problem in my code, also finding an issue potentially with someone else's code that I can contribute some suggestions potentially to, all in the space of minutes, right? And I didn't have to write a whole bunch of extra code to sift through that. I didn't have to make painful mistakes, tripping over myself and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, Recover is just a really, really powerful thing, and I've been using it a lot recently, and it just really helps me keep my momentum up. And when I hit these kinds of errors now, I don't sort of come to a screeching halt and throw my hands up in the air. I just go, All right, recover, deep breath. Let's figure out what's going on. Okay, so that's all I really wanted to say. I don't have much more other than, yeah, I mean, recover is a technique that is helpful for solving errors, but it's only when they're showstopper errors, right? Like your R basically has to stop so that you can recover. But recover can't help you where you've got logic problems that generate output that's not what you expected. So for those situations, you still need some other things in your toolkit, and maybe I'll do some posts on those. But for now, you've got recover. It works in any R editor, as you can see. You don't need RStudio to use it. So yeah, enjoy debugging, and let me know if this was useful, and also actually let me know if you have a nice way to handle this problem of like partitioning data sets with factors in such a way that you're guaranteed not to have this problem occur, because I always kind of hack my way through this. Yeah, so thanks for watching.